Hello and welcome into Full Screen Podcast. I'm your host, Kira Aster, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host, hard at work on the Narkina 5 Imperial Prison Complex, building the Death Star. It's Raven Ebert! Raven, one way out. One way out! How we doing?
Abolish prisons is my take. This is very offensive, but I guess there isn't really a good employment option in the Star Wars universe. I would probably be a spice miner because I love drugs. So I would be running spice, and probably because it's the thing that minorities end up doing. Poor Oscar Isaac.
This is so much. This is so much more powerful than you realize, because Andor gets arrested as a minority in Cassian Andor in the show Andor, and it's a whole thing. And it turns out, guys, spoilers, they're building the Death Star in prison.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Riz Ahmed, who was the beacon of South Asian representation in Star Wars first. I think he's been followed by Kumail Nanjiani and Indira Verma. So really love all the South Asians working for the Empire. Really cool.
Really cool, guys. Thanks. This is not what we wanted when we said more diversity.
No, I would actually love to see Kal Penn under like 20 pounds of makeup playing like a Bib Fortuna character, like him doing his like ladies man Indian uncle accent under like 20 pounds of makeup with like gross teeth, blue skin, and various appendages and tentacles coming out of his head. This is the kind of representation I want. I want weird nonsense.
I'm here for it. Kal, are you listening? So before we go into why we're talking about Star Wars, what's today's topic, I wanted to bring up one thing, which is the SAGs are this Sunday. Screen Actors Guild Awards are this Sunday, and they are on Netflix, Raven. They're going to be streaming. It happened. Awards are on streaming.
I think I brought this up before, where YouTube Live is such a convenient way to make sure that people have access to what you're, putting out there, but also gives a layer of accessibility and interaction that a lot of other people don't get from just watching TV. I think that, award stream posts on Twitter have finally made the people who are running this program from like a television perspective realize that, it's like a community gathering thing. People don't have Oscar parties the same way that they used to anymore. So maybe we can bring that feeling online, and we'll see how it does, but it's going to be relatively inexpensive. Doesn't take a lot of money, and there's also more room for people like making memes and secondary content out of it. So I think it's smart, considering that this is the Screen Actors Guild Award, which is, of course, the actors union in the industry. So all of the awards and nominations are for performances only across both television and film. This has only got actors in it. So you basically know everybody who's going to be.
It's only got hot people, so you don't have to look at the people, the little pale writers behind the scenes.
Like Kira said, you don't have to look at the rat-faced weaselly fucks who make the movies. You just have to look at the beautiful people.
Do all the work, yeah.
Yeah, in front of it. So, yeah, I think it'll be good. Also, I think that more industries need unions, and that's all I have to say about that.
Hell yeah, baby. Hell yeah. Truth to power. I will be very interested to see what the streaming numbers are, what the viewership is, what the reach is across social media. I have a good feeling about this. Not a bad feeling, as opposed to...
Except for Harrison Ford, who will be asked to present and will show up with 100% of the enthusiasm and charm that Harrison Ford is associated with.
Just wonderful. Yellowstone star Harrison Ford, or Yellowstone universe, we should say. So yeah, SAGs, we're looking forward to it. Before we get to today's topic, let's quickly talk about how the listeners can reach out to us on social media.
Yeah, we're probably going to be doing the SAG Watch on YouTube, and you can catch us on our YouTube channel, Full Screen Podcast. You can also hit us up on our Twitter and Instagram at fullscreen_pod. Feel free to leave us recommendations, comments, concerns, check in on our thoughts about SAG, check in about the insane weather patterns we've been experiencing, whatever you want to do. Actually, you can also reach out to us via email if you so desire. It's fullyscreened@gmail.com. If you have scams that you'd like us to forward to other people, Nigerian princes, pyramid schemes, we're here for everything.
A throwback, baby. Gen Z doesn't know what that's about.
Yeah, and it's fine. It's really just a source of comedy, but it used to be even easier to scam people online. We didn't have to go through like AI voice generators and masking cell phones and stuff like that.
It was a breeze. Yeah, alarming. All right. So, today's topic, finally. We are looking at the modern universe of Star Wars today, hence all the Star Wars talk. We are going to use what's been built over at Disney Plus by an outstanding, phenomenal creative mind, Dave Filoni, to apply those lessons into our world of tech and product, specifically the importance of product roadmaps. What are they? What informs them? What are the building blocks? How are they fleshed out? Who decides if and when to pivot? Who decides why we should follow through on a roadmap? All that good stuff. Undeniable foundation of our day to day, as Raven will attest. And now we are going to explore that using Star Wars as a case study. So, say goodbye to your love and happiness and attachments in life. We're off to the Jedi Temple to find out the whack metrics Yoda and Mace Windu were using to measure the Force. So get in, loser. We're going to Coruscant.
Welcome to the multiplying genre, where today we're going to be looking at the evolution of the Star Wars product offerings through the lens of the work of Dave Filoni, who I essentially believe is playing the role of Chief Product Officer. I know you
Hell yes!
So let's dive into some of the background around Dave Filoni. So who is Dave Filoni? So let's look at his history and his previous work prior to Lucasfilm. So he comes from the world of animation. He's worked in the animation department of some pretty big names in animated television. So he's done King of the Hill, which is more adult-oriented, and Kim Possible. And he was also a director for season 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So he did some episodes of book 1, Water. So he has a lot of clout in animation and in storytelling and visual presentation. So he's done a couple of really complex episodes that, blend action as well as the storytelling. People love the action in Avatar. It was so beautifully framed. And honestly, I think it works best in the medium of animation because I just don't think live action can capture it. But he did one of my favorite episodes, The Northern Air Temple. And he really worked with the writers and everybody on that show to create a beautiful combination of very serious topics. But it was heartfelt and genuine and gentle. And it was aimed for children, but you could still enjoy it as an adult because it didn't try to minimize the more mature themes of what was being discussed. I mean, the show is rooted. It kicks off with like genocide. So this is kind of a difficult topic
I
to
get
approach.
so surprised. I, as you know, watched the show recently during the pandemic, and I
Mm-hmm.
could not love it more. I just get so surprised that this was a show for children, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like the themes are so mature, and especially the episode you mentioned, like one of my favorites because it's one of those in between. I mean, I don't want to call it filler, but it is one of those in between episodes in between the action, but you're so
Mm-hmm.
enchanted by what you're seeing in this episode. And we're not going to give away really the plot of this episode, but he also did the Siege of the North, I believe. That was one of the
Mm-hmm.
war
And
episodes. And
that's what I said is he has a huge strength of being able to create action that is easy to follow without being visually overwhelming or feeling like sludge. So he was at Nickelodeon at the time, and in 2005, he moved to Lucasfilm Animation to essentially build that studio and get the projects off the ground. At this time, Lucasfilm Animation and the Star Wars property had not been bought by Disney, so they were just trying to figure out a lot of things independently. And he came in, I think, from the sounds of it, like he was personally recruited by George Lucas.
oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. And so the story is that when he got the call, he thought it was a joke because his friends, he was a very big Star Wars nerd. He would like there are stories of him like dressing up as his like favorite Jedi, Plo Koon. In fact, fun fact, the characters he plays now, for example, in The Mandalorian as the pilot, Wolf Trapper, it's all a reference to Jedi General Plo Koon's army, the Wolf Pack. But he thought it was a joke. Like, there's no way George Lucas is calling him for a meet and greet and for an interview. And I think that story is adorable.
yeah, he was a very sincere nerd about Star Wars. I think he attended the midnight premieres of all three of the prequel movies. It bode well for Lucasfilm Animation to get somebody who was, deeply involved not only with the world of animation, but clearly also cared very much about Star Wars. And he's done several projects with Lucasfilm Animation. He has, of course, he did the Star Wars, the Clone Wars, both the movie and the series. The movie was set between prequels 2 and 3 and was released to theaters and meant to serve as a pilot to the Clone Wars series itself. This is one of the most interesting and complex situations that I have ever seen because the Clone Wars movie, as I understand, I've never seen either one of these properties, but while the Clone Wars series is beloved, the Clone Wars movie is considered an unapologetic piece of shit. And that's very surprising to me, considering that a lot of the same creative team came on. But I guess what that says to me is that he's someone who clearly learns from his mistakes and works harder to address and resolve criticism that is presented to him, specifically when it comes to writing characters. So
It's quite a tight 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I have, as you know, many thoughts on the movie itself, but I do think it was supposed to be an experiment and then kind of early feedback from the audience into what a series could be. Because we do see this was the introduction of Anakin's Padawan, Ahsoka, for the first time for the
mhm.
audience. So the feedback is also related to that, and she's in this like annoying tube top and just going master. The story
And
itself wasn't very interesting in this movie.
all of this is explained and explored a lot more within the Clone Wars series, which he, I believe, just concluded pretty recently. It ran from 2008 and ended in 2020. Of course, there isn't a new season for every year in between. The production was kind of chopped up a little bit because of his commitments to other projects, but also the amount of work required for the animation definitely got a lot more involved because of the quality of the animation being produced. As I understand it, it's not traditional hand drawn animation anymore. It's entirely computer artists working with, preset designs that are coming in. So it looks a lot more realistic. There's, a really good 3D mapping and the textures and the movement. and all the fun stuff that people like to see about the Jedi fights, like the lightsabers and the flipping around and the action choreography. That takes money and time. And Disney and Lucasfilm Animation obviously gave him that ground. So he created a couple of more series after this. He co-created Star Wars Rebels that ran from 2014 to 18. And he created Star Wars Resistance from 2018 to 2020. And this was around the time that he got promoted to an executive producer and creative director in Lucasfilm, like the broader Lucasfilm studio, not just the animation side. So he started moving into live action production. So he's been involved with The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, and has brought a lot of his knowledge about the Star Wars lore and mythos and the series. I believe he's like a walking, series Bible at this point, because he's probably created just as many characters, if not more, as George
Original
Lucas.
canon characters.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's an interview. By the way, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni's friendship is precious, and there's an interview where John is saying something like, "Oh, we wanted to introduce this like new character into this new episode," and Dave is like shaking his head like, no, there's no way this character can be in this time frame. This wouldn't make sense. So I feel, yeah, everyone relies on him to correct and course correct.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the live action productions a lot more later on when we go into the roadmaps, but
Yeah, I think that's what you mentioned about Dave Filoni, is that he really thinks about things from that very ground level, where Jon Favreau can have the luxury of looking at things from a visual and cinematic perspective of like, oh, what looks good for storytelling, and he needs somebody to come in and ground him on the very dense lore of the Star Wars universe. And I think Dave Filoni serves that role for really any creative coming into Star Wars. He doesn't assume sole creative control. He understands that there are some things he can't do and some things he does very well, and he's not afraid to delegate. I really respect that as someone in product. It helps to just make things smoother, but also faster, and you get a better product at the end if you understand that, oh, I have certain limitations around this. I want somebody else to come in. So he also, created a new canon for Star Wars for like a new generation to come in. The medium of animation is very cool to me. I find it just as beautiful as live action. Sometimes I don't get the appeal of turning animated things into live action. I think you lose a lot from that perspective. But Absolutely. He brought in an entire new generation for this and created rich characters and rich stories that he took time to develop. And it's been very cool to see that all of his content has not been about only the Jedi. Obviously, you have the Clone Wars that was very, very focused on specifically the characters of Anakin Skywalker and his Padawan. But of course, the other person who is central to that story was Obi-Wan Kenobi. So it's, very Jedi focused there. But the Rebels and Resistance was kind of showing the other side, like scrappy kids without magical powers and cool light swords. And I think his background in animation, again, he's created such visually distinct characters that Star Wars is finally beginning to feel like the science fiction that it's always claimed to be. And I think that concept has come in a little bit more with Dave Filoni. Like, he has fun coming up with concepts for alien characters, because this is, of course, set in space. He's also focusing on the star part of Star Wars and not just the wars part.
Yeah.
So I like that.
He often hand draws a lot of, or he used to when he was active on Instagram, a lot of like alien figures and post them on his Instagram with like a cute message.
Yeah,
and I really appreciated really that like window into, because like he's still hands on as a CPO,
Yeah, I find that contrast between him and George Lucas. The first thing is, of course, he actually plans things out. He has a clear vision of the end point, so you don't end up with Luke and Leia tonguing each other right before there's a revelation that they are related entirely by blood, same
Are
mother,
you
same
are you
father,
saying there's a
same
roadmap,
birthday.
Raven?
I'm saying there's a roadmap, that he has a clear destination in mind for each of his projects, so you don't end up with that. I also think that it helps to have somebody who creates children's content coming in to create something that's for everybody, because when George Lucas tried it, we got Jar Jar Binks, and I think a lot of people just jumped off bridges or walked into the ocean after they heard Jar Jar Binks. So I don't see that repeating. I think he's been extremely successful with, of course, Baby Yoda, Grogu coming in and melting everyone's hearts collectively. He's really good with that design of knowing the balance, when to strike a balance between cute and funny without going too much into one direction. I mean, I told you already, I loved the Nick Nolte character from The Mandalorian. I have
Quill.
spoken. He's
Yes.
he's terrific. Best performance Nick Nolte has given in his life. Fight me. That sense of like having an idea and constantly iterating, like building on what's already existed and fleshing things out a bit more and rounding everything up. I would say for me, and I'm not part of the Star Wars fandom, that's why he has my respect. But because you're obviously more ingrained in the Star Wars fandom, I would love to know if what I'm saying connects with you, if you really feel like that is what the fandom also loves about him.
That's one of the things as well, I think, Raven. First of all, great summary of how he compares to George and his strengths. But I think what's really earned the fandom's respect is like how he's brought all of these eras together and all of these like different types of fans together. So if you look at his animated history, he's done Resistance, Rebels, Clone Wars, and he's going in between the trilogies of like what happened in between and after and before these trilogies to really fill in these characters and flesh out the universe. What you don't maybe get, what lacked in the movies, you course correct in these series and in these in between shows.
Yeah.
And he's the father of Ahsoka Tano, like one of the most beloved characters in this universe. Beautiful, complex, incredible character, alien, female, something we hadn't seen before. and
Yeah.
and that's what he
He
does. He
added
he really
he
go
added
ahead.
layers to a character that George Lucas created as having a crop top and being annoying, which was what he probably thought of women in 2000s.
Honestly,
So
yes.
I truly appreciate that, and it's a fascinating thing to see. From as a writer, you want to understand when people don't connect with your character, what you can do to change that. And the evolution of Ahsoka Tano as a character is a case study in improving as a writer. So I really love that. But if I had to sum it all up, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Dave Filoni is not the type of guy who would have ever written the words "somehow Palpatine returned."
Boom. Let's get to product roadmaps. So I understand not all of our audiences are going to be product or tech adjacent. So let's do a quick one pager, Raven. Product roadmaps are simply, honestly, the visual representation of your product's releases, right? Immediate and what's next, and give a sense of the short term and long term goals. And many organizations, it's very different on how you choose to maintain the roadmaps, update the roadmaps. There's different styles, different goals, different ideas, different tools. You can keep it simple, you can make it as complex as you want, but commonly a few things. So number one, who are the audience of your roadmaps? So your stakeholders and your business partners, so anyone who has a stake in what you're building, your executives and your leaders, your development teams like your designers and engineers. MCU clearly has not been sharing their roadmap.
Yeah, I would say that they were the pioneers of this, and I think they brought that culture into Star Wars, because Star Wars has become a lot more streamlined, and they're solving multiple problems with a roadmap. For one, they obviously know like what to make before the other, how much time, resources, and effort has to be allocated into each part of the different projects that they're working on. But they're also telling their audience what to look forward to, keep Star Wars as a brand in the collective memories of, audiences
Yeah,
who tend to get
exactly.
overwhelmed with a lot of stuff. So it's giving you like a lineup of what's coming, what to watch in which order, and what to expect within it. So you can, for example, understand that certain things may be focused on the Jedi side, some things may be focused on the Rebel side, and
Yeah. And that's it. Like, we're going to tie as much as we can with all the roadmap talk, everything to Star Wars. And as you alluded to some of this already, there you're building a roadmap because you have goals in mind, right? And the general goal is give a concise, meaningful context on your features, on your build, what's coming, why, what, how, all of that stuff provides a snapshot of scope. So, like, scope is very important because scope creep, as we know, is a thing. You need to really define your scope on like what this feature and launch is going to be. Yeah.
in a Star Wars context, I would say you define your goals to be like, okay, this is the context. We're going to put out 2 movies and 4 television shows. What plot points do we want to cover between each movie and each television show? What comes first? There's been, for example, a lot of discussion around whether the Obi-Wan Kenobi television show should have been a movie or not, because
Watch it. Okay, yes, I agree with that.
no, from a product perspective, you have to think about that, because it's like what you talked about, the scope. If you're stretching things out to be longer than they need to be, or you're condensing too
Yeah.
much into something, properly defining like where something ends and something begins in terms of what story and material and lore that you want to cover within each item, that's extremely important for something like Star Wars. Particularly noticeable in Star Wars because it comes with so much backlog, as we would say. There's so much dense
Mm-hmm.
lore and so much information that you have to rely upon the other person who's consuming the product to know. So
Why one thing is prioritized over another, given that rich backlog. Yes, it's all product roadmap is your entry point into all of that. So with that, goal 3 again lines up everything that you're building, everything that you put on the roadmap ideally lines up to a strategic initiative that your company has, so you can also like visually see whatever's happening is actually important to this particular objective or this particular North Star. So for example, again tying it back to Star Wars, we could say Disney objective, of course, is to expand new revenue streams. So key results. So I'm now talking about OKRs, which is another word Raven and I use on an everyday basis. So objective and key results. And your objective could be expand new revenue streams. Your key result tied to this objective could be, let's say, increase toy sales by 4% in Latin markets, in Latin American markets. And then what are the features and what are the launches, what are the deliverables that tie into this key result and this objective? Could be, let's say, feature 1, introduction of a new droid in a Disney Plus series with an adorable quirk. Perhaps an emo droid, perhaps a lovable stutter. Feature 2 could be create a seamless mobile first ticketing experience for CCXP Brazil 2023, so Comic Con in Brazil, prominently featuring Hasbro toy art of said new droid, B2 Emo from Endor.
feature
Adorable
3,
droid.
more sexy Latin American people
Oh my
in the
god.
Star Wars universe. Doing something, doing nothing, I don't care. Just be on screen, be sexy. I'm talking about more close up shots of Diego Luna crying. Hot people
The
bring
hot
in
people.
audiences. Feature 3, hot
Listen,
people. That's it.
it's alarming how many hot people are in Endor, and I'm here for it. And goal 4. Most importantly, roadmaps accomplish a very basic function, right? Timelines and statuses need to be communicated, need to be shown, verbalized alongside the progress and estimated completion dates. So it's literally a calendar in some ways, your roadmap at the end of the day.
Yeah, you have a production calendar. You have to schedule and accommodate for people who are coming in to perform, people who are coming in to do set work, decoration, set up the volume for visual effects and stuff. Then you have people working visual effects, hopefully with enough time to get food and sleep and see their family and all the other basic human needs that a VFX artist has. And of course, even keep room for reshoots, right? Because sometimes things don't turn out the way that you want to. You want to go back in. It's like the QA process, right? You do a quality analysis,
Yes.
you see it, you go back in, you identify bugs, and you squash them for the release.
100%. And also support the physical and mental health of your developers. Like, what are you doing? Guys, looking at you, Kevin Feige. Added, and then goal 5, added bonus of a roadmap, which is like the unsaid function it accomplishes, is it builds alignment, real-time consensus, and clout for your product, and enables the ease of communicating updates and changes with different and vast audiences. So you're not going to be writing like 100 emails all day because one tiny thing changed, and roadmap accomplishes a lot of that. And then it serves as a tool for kind of rallying everyone, all different kinds of people, internal and external, around one North Star. And this is essential. Many products and events and sagas and stories fizzle fizzle because they lost the North Star. I am I hate to be taking
Oh,
so many
what are
shots
you
at
unsubtly
MC,
hinting at over here? What are you
but
pretending to walk on eggshells for over here?
it's we are recording this, and Ant-Man Quantumania has just come out, and it's not doing well, y'all. And one of the chief criticisms is it's just, has it lost the plot, you know? So it does make you think, like, is there a roadmap for the MCU? Is there a meaningful roadmap moving forward for
Yeah,
Phase 4, for
I
example,
think the sense that things were moving toward a focal point was a lot more clear in the previous movies. But I also, if you go back and compare it to like what they called Marvel Phase One, that sense wasn't there either. I think it's just a reset from the
It
status
is a
quo.
reset,
So
yes.
yeah, things may feel unfocused. There wasn't that sense before from Star Wars. It's always been a fly by the seat of your pants franchise. That's the
No.
George Lucas marker that kind of has embellished the entire franchise. And I think it's moving towards something more streamlined, and that can change the tone of what you see in Star Wars. So it may be confusing for a lot of fans who were like, hey, why does this all feel like there's a larger story arc going on there? Because that sense of storytelling has not been seen before.
Yeah, and like one of the things that the roadmap accomplishes also, I think, is once you put everything in one place, something really powerful starts to happen. This like visual representation, you have everything in one place, and you as the SME, the subject matter expert, have it and stare at it and update it, and it's there for you to look at, and your business folks and whoever your audience is looking at it. An informed, purposeful, significant plans start to emerge from this. So if you've built a 1-year roadmap or 6-month roadmap, and you're looking at it and you're measuring success of your project that just came out or your product that just released, you are able to get so much more information to then build a 10-year roadmap. Of course that will change, but you can have a sense, a very informed, purposeful sense from this exercise. So roadmap
Yeah.
creation, roadmap reviews are very important,
Yeah, it's
essential.
like it's like the intention of the IKEA instructions. You know that's what it's supposed to look like. Whether it actually ends up looking like that or not is, I guess, the effectiveness of your ability to deliver as a product manager, as well as how well you work with your development team and your designers.
Execution,
Yeah.
yes.
So if you really wanted to, for example, make a Han Solo movie and didn't have any clarity on
This is gonna
whether
hurt. This is gonna
it
hurt.
was it was gonna be a funny movie or a serious movie, and just end up with like a pile of goo that resembles neither, it's not necessarily the fault of everyone involved if there's no clear direction. And that comes from your stakeholders, your executives, your Kathleen Kennedys, right? You can't blame poor Alden Ehrenreich for what happened in Solo.
We
Shout
stand
out
with
to
you,
you,
Alden.
Alden. Yeah,
Yes.
you're a good egg from what I know. So I'm sorry you
Yeah.
got thrown under the bus like this, but that's just a really good contrast of where that's what Star Wars used to be, kind of before Dave Filoni got involved with the broader production.
Yeah.
So
And you can see like the real time, one of the things about roadmaps, as we've been hinting at, is like it changes based on the feedback, and we're already seeing like things are not static with what is Star Wars now. There's like projects that have been put on hold, projects that are getting greenlit because of the real-time feedback that's coming. And I love to see it. It's very agile, it's very product, it's very tech mindset that is coming into Hollywood, and we love to see it. Again, I will tie it back to Star Wars, and I know Raven disagrees with me, but looking at the example of Sheev Palpi, for example,
no.
Palpatine.
No. That man is the personification of, oops, I failed my way to the top of the Galactic Empire. He didn't have a plan.
Are you saying he didn't have the objective of galactic tyranny? Listen, he iterated on his apprentices 3 times. He knew what he was doing.
That was because he's a terrible Sith Lord. He didn't iterate. They died. Hold up. That's not what iteration.
Testing.
No, he doesn't have multitudes. He has multi-dudes. He literally just got a new apprentice every time because they got cut in half and robot legged. And by the way, he just didn't even bother to check if he was alive or not. It's like, you need to be, full top and bottom half is required. He didn't plan for Anakin to have a wife. He was like, I'm going to pick the most annoying kid on Tatooine with zero redeeming qualities. Oops, not only did he get a hot wife, she's also the thorn in my side for all of my political stuff that I'm trying to do. She's always being the one being like, guys, wait, hold up, do we need a war? He didn't see that shit coming.
You show midichlorian Jesus some respect, Raven.
He could have been found out as a Sith Lord if someone had done a midichlorian test on him. No one did it. It is because the Jedi is dumb. They're dumb as fuck. And
I will agree with that. Like, he didn't have good opponents to really fight him on the roadmap that I still maintain that he was building.
I actually think that you and I can come to an agreement and say that the Jedi Order and the Jedi Council lacked a roadmap. They had no strategy.
Meditate on this, we must.
No focus, no plan. Get a roadmap, you must.
Yes. I had a whole thing here just about the Agile / Sith doctrine, but I'm just going to skip forward to saying that Palpatine never prioritized tech debt on his roadmap, and this is why his chief technology officer, Vader, turned against him in the end.
No, what are you talking about?
Thank you, Lord Vader.
He took care of tech debt. Remember when Anakin just killed the Nemoidians? Where they showed up and they were like, "Oh,
that one time is not enough, man." Oh yeah,
that's how you resolve tech debt. You just delete the backlog. That's one way. Oh, we have 15 bugs. No, we don't. Closed. Won't do.
Amazing. Okay, so picking up from Raven's great summary of Dave Filoni's early career at Lucasfilm, we cut to 2017. So Jon Favreau, really in some ways responsible for the kickoff of the MCU, was working on The Lion King at the time, which we won't go into, the live action Lion King. This was 2017, so he pitched the idea of a Mandalorian focused series to Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, good old Kathy Kennedy. And lo and behold, Dave Filoni has apparently done the same thing around this time, and she reconnected them both with each other. And I say reconnected because Never forget, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni actually became good friends at Skywalker Ranch early on, during when Favreau was making Iron Man and Dave was making Clone Wars. They became such good friends that Jon Favreau voiced a Mandalorian character by the name of Pre Vizsla, which film nerdery.
Oh, like
Yeah.
pre-visual? Oh, that's cute.
Vizsla clan is a huge name in the Mandalorian culture, if people are familiar with the canon, and Jon Favreau continues to voice another character in The Mandalorian now, Paz Vizsla, also of the same clan. So Jon Favreau clearly loves the Mandalorians. And this is what we call in corporate America synergy. Both of these people, friends, fans of Star Wars, individually kind of pitched a Mandalorian focused series, and both of them came together for it. So John's thirst for doing something inspired by the lone gunslinger Wild West theme and in space during the scum and villainy sort of period after episode 6, combined with Dave Filoni's, as Raven mentioned earlier, encyclopedic knowledge of the Star Wars universe, really aligned perfectly. And remember, this is when the sequel trilogy is going strong. And we're going to try to minimize our thoughts about sequel ST today, but the toxicity that emerged during that time, the like they couldn't rally. It was they didn't care about the product, they didn't care about the fans, and the leaders weren't protecting their teams enough, the actors enough, the cast and crew enough, and it just became, I think that was a poisonous time, and it felt like this beautiful world was really falling apart. And during this time, like from the ashes, something good was emerging, something separate, something totally different
Yeah. I'm
going on.
gonna quote Avatar again from The Legend of Korra, but Aang says to Korra, when you are at your lowest point, you're open to the greatest change. And I think that's really what happened here, because they lost that clout of Star Wars is always going to make money. They saw diminishing returns with Solo and the Rise of Skywalker, and so they realized maybe it's time to take a different approach. So
And that, what a beautiful line. I just makes me want to rewatch The Last Airbender. Amazing.
wait, the movie?
So,
The Shyamalan movie?
oh,
No,
hell
no.
no.
Okay.
Sorry.
You meant Avatar, The Last Airbender.
I said The Last Airbender because there's another Avatar right now that's big. Yes, no. Not the Shyamalan one. So skip to 2019, and I remember the ads for the Disney Plus launch being everywhere. I remember seeing the posters on the subway, which is how I get all of my information, the subway ads, and I know what's topical, what's trendy in New York City. And the Mandalorian posters were everywhere as well, and they were really hyping up this launch of the show, of the platform of Disney Plus. And then this was, I believe, October, November in 2019, and the show's first season ended around late December in that year, 2019. And the general success of the show, the cultural impact with my baby Jedi, the light of my life, apple of my eyes, Grogu, Disney Plus became a very, very valued property early on in the business. And the audience took notice, the execs took notice. And this then has spun a frankly unprecedented slate of stories, all sort of spurred by the momentum Dave Filoni has granted the company. So I'm just going to go through the roadmap of the stories that we have now because of really the success of the season 1 of Mandalorian, the what I am going to call the Mandoverse, really. Most of these are Mandoverse. Some of these are just spurred by the momentum of Mandalorian becoming a success. So January 2020, this was already actually in the works because of the clout that Dave Filoni had developed within Disney. So January 2020 is when we get the season 7 of the Clone Wars, which was canceled or put on ice before it ended with season 6 a few years before. So season 7, the highly anticipated season 7, aired in January 2020. And then we go to October 2020 with Mandalorian season 2, all on Disney Plus. May 2021, we have The Bad Batch, which is a spin-off of the Clone Wars, focusing on Clone Force 99, the defected clones, actually mid-season 2 of The Bad Batch right now. So that's May 2021. In September 2021, we get one of my favorite things that Star Wars has ever done, which is Visions, Star Wars Visions. So these are sort of non-canon stories, 6 or 7 episodes, I believe, that are done by a Japanese anime studio, different anime studios, and they
Hell
focus on
yeah,
different parts of
baby.
the galaxy. And it's such a beautiful look at different types of people around the galaxy through a visual medium, like just very anime, very true to the styles of anime.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just, it's cool to see animation. I love
it was
different
so
styles. So,
beautiful. It was
yeah.
gorgeous, stunning. And I know friends and so many people who are not fans of Star Wars at all, and they loved this show. So you don't have to, it's another entry point for you into the story. I think this might be the boldest and the most experimental and greatest thing they might have done, actually. Like, this is gonna, like, we're getting season 2. I'm gonna talk about it shortly, of Vision. So it's actually quietly a really good move on their part. And then so that was September 2021. We get in December 2021 the first spin-off of the Mandoverse, the Book of Boba Fett. And then we get in May 2020, so literally every 3-4 months we're getting a show. Yeah. So in May 2022 we get Obi-Wan Kenobi, what I'd been waiting my entire life for. Then we get, in September, we get Andor, a huge, huge success for this universe. Again, one of those things that draws you into the universe and you don't have to be a fan of the story. And
I
helmed
I
by,
just want to say it's helmed by Tony Gilroy, who thankfully has realized that stormtroopers are not cool. And this is really like baby's first guide into, is fascism a bad thing? Actually, yes. And I'm happy to see, sort of the quote unquote common man struggles of the Star Wars universe.
yes, you see very few stormtroopers, and you see actually people in Nazi-like uniforms, and it becomes very real very fast.
It does that job of like, oh, remember, how Alderaan got blowed up in Star Wars? Well, these are the people that live there. Like, these were
Yeah.
the people that,
Yes.
this is the consequence of war and of people trying to grab, ultimate power without having to answer to anybody else. Nobody is left out of it. You can't ever look back into a conflict between people and say, well, it doesn't involve me, so I'm out. And it's nice
He
to
leaned
see
in, and
Andy Serkis's face, like
oh
his
my
actual
gosh, he was
face.
so amazing. I just one way out, baby. Yeah, Diego Luna, like a lot of the cast and crew of Rogue One is back for this show, Cassian Andor, and we get the great Fiona Shaw as Andor's mom, just a powerful rebel fighter, and we get Adria Arjona, incredible performances. We get Denise Go, all of these people just give it their all because Tony Gilroy is their leader on this project. And honestly, like, I think it's episode 2 maybe that you actually see some space, and you forget that you're in Star Wars until episode 2, and you're like, oh yeah, this is actually a Star Wars show. Then we get, in October 2022, a month later, we get Tales of the Jedi. So these were 6 episodes focused on the arc of what Ahsoka was like as a baby and Dooku's young days, which was, again, that's what Dave Filoni does best, bringing you into empathizing with why people made certain choices, what failed them in society to be able to draw them into
Dooku was
into
evil because he was played by Christopher Lee, who was
yeah.
Saruman and Dracula. I mean, that's the
Mwah,
canonical
mwah,
reason.
Saruman.
That is the reason. It was Christopher freaking Lee. I mean, if they're going to
That
just have,
style of his arm behind his back as he fights with, like, I think it's like, I forget what style of Jedi fighting it's called. Is it Form 2? Form 1? Guys, correct me. But
I have
he's
no
perfect.
idea. As long as they can recapture the swag of the great Christopher Lee, may he rest in peace, the only person I think who actually deserves a knighthood, not just for his performances in movie, but his awesome heavy metal music as well. What a badass. He was making heavy metal until his like 90s. Good for him.
Bad Batch season 2, January 2023, is going on right now, getting rave reviews, actually like fleshing out a lot more about the Empire and the fascism of the Empire.
Yeah. I hope Tim Wera Morrison is enjoying these, because he's like, oh, I played a very one-dimensional Django and now Boba Fett, but now there's so much being fleshed out that I hope he can feel more of a connection to his character now than he did 20
Yes,
years ago.
he did. He brought a lot of his in Boba Fett. What I love to see is like fleshing out of Tuskens and not calling them sand people anymore, and him bringing a lot of the Maori customs to him joining the Tuskens, the native people of Tatooine. So it's lovely to see this. Then March 1st, so season 3 of Mandalorian. So this is a full-on Star Wars season. Like from here on until like May, and honestly until the end of the year. Raven will not stop
I
hearing about
mean,
Star
we're
Wars.
gonna get Eiffel Towered by Pedro Pascal, and I mean this
The Last of
respectfully,
Us is
Daddy.
also the Last of Us is also on right now on HBO.
Yeah.
So it's
Pedro
full
Pascal, are
on.
you young and helpless and cute? He will take you from one destination to the other.
Incredible. May 4th, we get two new shows. So we get Visions Volume 2, which is, so Raven, this is going to be actually, now they're expanding outside of Japan, so they're getting different anime studios. So we're getting Cartoon Saloon from Ireland, 88 Pictures from India. We're getting a studio from Spain, I believe, and they're expanding beyond and like bringing different voices and giving other creators a chance to tell stories in Star Wars.
Different animation styles. That's very cool.
Absolutely. And then we get Young Jedi Adventures, a new show on May 4th, animated as well. Then we get, can't wait for this, some point in 2023, later this year, we're getting Ahsoka Season 1, y'all, which is going to serve as of course, the Ahsoka arc, also a continuation of Star Wars Rebels, because we'll see the Rebels crew, Jedi Ezra Bridger, we'll see Hera Syndulla, all of these characters, beloved characters, really come back into Ahsoka. And then we get another show, Skeleton Crew, which we don't have much information about, but Jude Law is in it. It's a live action show and Jude Law is in it, baby.
He has one more kid on the way, so whatever he can to do to get
needs the franchise money now the Fantastic Beast is dead. Then we get Acolyte 2024, which is led by Amanda Stenberg, who's just one of my favorite young actresses, and it's created by Leslie Headland. Cannot wait for this one, and this is actually focused on a dark side user, a force user on the dark side, a female that is at an unknown time in the galaxy. So it's not going to be the time that we know during like the Skywalker saga or anything. So I would love to see a gray, dark character and a female-led Star Wars show about
Star Wars,
that we know nothing
please
about.
make dinosaurs canonical. I would love to see Jedi in Dinosaur Land. That would be amazing. And Amanda Stenberg also has a franchise expertise. She's from the Hunger Games, and she was excellent in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies.
Oh my god, I was just gonna say, stole the show. Yeah.
It's an excellent movie. Guys, don't worry, Pete Davidson is not in it for long. I'm excited to see this show with Amanda Stenberg too.
Yeah. Dave Filoni is executive producer on most of these. And that's how it's done, baby.
Yes, my master.
Welcome to Cross-Dysfunctional. This is where today we'll be reflecting on the transition of Star Wars into streaming. Is it a boon? Is it a good thing? Or is it a curse? Let's discuss. So in May 2022, there was a Vanity Fair cover, The Rebellion, and it said The Rebellion will be televised, and it's by Anthony Breznican, and it features the Mandalorian himself, Pedro Pascal. We have Rosario Dawson, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor, Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, of course, and then we have Diego Luna as Cassian Andor, and all of these are in character in their outfits, and kind of embracing all fans of this story. There's so many different types of characters into the story, and this cover was just sort of a look into what the new streaming slate of Star Wars is. What is the future of the new Star Wars? And it is when they first reveal Hayden Christensen is also back in Star Wars. Well, it was announced before, but this is the first look into him wearing a cape and him with a lightsaber in the article. And then you also see the executive producers of Mandalorian and Obi-Wan Kenobi, Deborah Chow. You see Kathy Kennedy in her blue power suit. So it's a very interesting look and interview. With that, I have been reflecting on why streaming is a pro for Star Wars. So I would say it's a pro, number one, because Star Wars was never just movies. And I know people like to believe that, and sort of like complain and use it as like, that was it, Star Wars was movies, but it was so much more than that for so many people.
Yeah,
Books and
those people are denying the existence of the Star Wars holiday special, babes. We remember.
Yeah, there's video games that are highly respected. There's so many people that I know that don't care about the TV animated universe of Star Wars, but they're so into the lore of the video games. We have books, we have comics, so many jump to mind, but I'm just going to highlight some of the ones that I own and I have read. Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. It's sort of like Qui-Gon's story with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Queen's Shadow by E.K. Johnston. It really looks at Padme as her own woman and not whatever George Lucas created with Natalie Portman. And we get the Star Wars Thrawn, which is one of my favorite characters in the universe, by Timothy Zahn, a key character from Legends that's now been brought into canon. So Legends is what was true, what was canon in Star Wars before Disney bought it. Bought Lucasfilm, and now that some of the things have been decanonized and that's referred to as Legends. We have Brotherhood by Mike Chen. We have Ahsoka by Dave Filoni. And there's so many comics. So Jason Aaron, who's also a big name across the Marvel comics, he has the Skywalker Strike series that's very beloved. We have Karen Gillan's Vader comics, volume 1 and 2, and maybe more. And then Dr. Aphra comics as well. That's another character that fans are hoping will enter canon, because Dr. Aphra, an ally gray sort of character, an archaeologist, by the way, space archaeologist, is very beloved by fans. And then Rise of Kylo Ren comics by Charles Soule also kind of flesh out the character, which the sequel trilogy failed to do. And then we have video games, Jedi Fallen Order, with Cal Kestis as a Jedi who escaped Order 66, and his cute little droid BD-1. We have Knights of the Old Republic, height of Jedi powers in the Old Republic, way, way, way before, all of the characters that we know. So this was a lot more than just movies. So when it's entering streaming, it's almost like it's natural that it find this kind of story medium and this kind of platform to tell more types of different stories. So now with that, accessibility is number 2. I would say streaming has really been a pro because the accessibility to wider audiences, different genres, and providing different entry points for people, as we mentioned earlier with Visions, with Andor. Honestly, like I've been thinking, like, it's so much easier to tell serialized stories that are profound and that you connect with more on streaming versus movies. Sometimes.
Yeah, you get breathing room, right?
You get breathing room if done right, of course. Like as you were saying, Raven, earlier, some of the things could have been movies. Yeah, so like maybe you like Andor because of Tony Gilroy's crime thriller sort of style, and then because you liked Andor, you love what Cassian Andor was representing with the rebellion. Maybe you start to watch Star Wars Rebels because of the rebellion cat and mouse strategy game across the galaxy vibes, and you're hooked. You find a different entry point. Number 3, I would say why streaming is a pro is diversity. So Jon Favreau has specifically said he wants to make this medium be more for and by just white men. So he wants to tell stories that are much more diverse, and he's been very open about that. He's been bringing in so many different types of people behind the scenes to be executive producers with him, and different types of directors.
Yeah, this is quite a feat. A band of rebels, hope wins, against oppression and fascism. So you can tell that stories with diverse people, not just, diversity within the human race, but outside of it. I want to see weird aliens. Give me that tentacle shit.
Yes. And I remember, we talked about this in the last episode when we covered rom-coms on streaming, how the medium lends itself to more experimentation and more chances and more risks and more diverse voices because the stakes are lower, so people are more willing to take risks. And I remember when Rogue One came out, it was such a big thing, and Diego Luna had said, like, it's very powerful for him as a fan of Star Wars to see someone lead the story in the character of Andor with an accent who's Hispanic.
I mean, Diego, I love you, but Carrie Fisher's accent changed from movie 1 to movie 2. She was clearly trying to be more British in A New Hope and gave that up and was just a sassy New York broad in The Empire Strikes Back. So, sorry, Diego, you're not the first person with accent diversity.
Yes, oh my god, so much diversity from a New York accent to a British accent. Love. But of course, like, it's very, like, I just remember those powerful interviews, and now I'm like, you are Andor, and it makes total sense. The directing team that Jon Favreau has brought in, so I want to highlight some of the names. So most of these are actually what came out in season 3, who will be directing episodes of season 3. So Bryce Dallas Howard has been very involved in all of the Mandalorian series, in Book of Boba Fett as well, and she's excelled as a director. I'm such a big fan. She's like told this story with such love and care and precision that she's so respected by fans. And then Rick Famuyiwa, who was a small director doing very different things before he came on to the Star Wars universe, and he's told so many amazing stories within the Star Wars universe. And then we're getting 3 amazing new directors in season 3. We're getting Rachel Morrison, who was a DP on Black Panther, so she's going to be directing some episodes of The Mandalorian. Peter Ramsey from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And then we're getting Lee Isaac Chung from Minari. Jon Favreau is very, very dedicated to bringing all these different voices to tell the story into this universe that is for everyone,
Into the Spider-Verse is such a great movie, like such a great visual spectacle. I hope he gets to keep that. And they got the money for it. They can't cheap out on him, so...
I have very much noticed, and I think that's the thing, like, all the episodes are very different of The Mandalorian. You get to see the director's strengths and different styles, and so I hope that continues moving forward across all stories that have different directors. And Rick Famuyiwa, I wanted to say also, has been added to the executive producer team, so he is now an executive producer based on his work on the past 2 seasons. And I wanted to call out Deborah Chow, who did a lot of episodes of Mandalorian season 1, maybe 2, I'm not sure of the 2, but she was the director for Obi-Wan Kenobi. So there is a lot of acknowledgement of people's work across this team of Lucasfilm, and Jon Favreau as their fearless leader and Dave Filoni as their champion is a good thing to have. And then why streaming is a boon for Star Wars. Another reason, cost. It's just cheaper, plain and simple, to make stories on streaming and make them good stories on streaming. So for comparison, Mando season 1 cost around 120 million to make. Andor cost around 15 to 20 million per episode, and they actually went outside into the world in Scotland, and they had 12 episodes. Clone Wars cost, I see Raven laughing. Clone Wars cost around 2 million per episode for season 1, and they had 12 episodes. All of these in comparison with The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which cost more than 300 million each, I believe. So it's just cheaper to make those. And
sometimes you just have to wait for the sun to rise and you'll get pretty colors in the sky instead of doing
you
it
mean
in
the
the
twin
volume.
suns to rise, Raven?
I think that's only in Tatooine, right? Do all planets in Star Wars have twin suns?
Just Tatooine. Just our main planet that we can never leave.
Okay, let's leave Tatooine. I mean, Luke Skywalker fucking hated Tatooine and we're still there. It's like...
he didn't want to return to Tatooine so much that he put our beloved baby on like an X-Wing with R2-D2, and he was like, you go, I'm not going to that godforsaken planet. Like, bye.
I don't blame him. Yo, fuck Tatooine.
Fuck you, Luke.
We're off Tatooine.
This is my take.
I mean, okay, I get it. He wasn't raised to be a dad, I guess. So
True. Awful. That baby was alone. Luke.
Isn't he like 60 years old?
Yeah, he's by 60, now he's 60. Right? Listen, he's a baby.
I've stepped into something. I'm respectfully backing away.
He's just a growing little baby. Okay, so, and then the last thing I would say is why streaming is beneficial for Star Wars is the data is much richer that you get from this platform, more real-time, more accurate, and easier than ever, really. The access and the profundity of this data.
Oh, yeah. So
if
metrics, baby!
Metrics.
Give me that metrics! Yeah.
As Palpy said, while building his roadmap.
Not from a Jedi will you get bar graphs on your acquisition funnel, Anakin.
Listeners can't see this, but Raven is doing the evil head turn. So it's great.
Not from a Jedi. I mean, this is true though, that they can go in and analyze like micro behaviors around what users are currently seeing along with their Star Wars content. So for example, if you are continuously watching Star Wars and 10 Things I Hate About You and they put Julia Stiles in Star Wars, I'm not saying you should do that, but please do that. I would love to see Julia Stiles in Star Wars. Please do that. That could completely happen from a metrics perspective because it's like, oh, what else are users doing while they're watching this? What kind of content did they consume? What have they consistently rated the same way that they have rated our Star Wars content? It's very rich. I agree with you.
Powerful.
It's a lot of spice to be mined over there. So streaming actually also changes a lot about the way Star Wars is consumed. And I think the biggest one, the most obvious one I can think of is that the people who went to see Star Wars in theaters in 1979 aren't the ones watching the content anymore. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a change, It's like unprecedented to see a franchise with a continuous arc of characters and stories last this long. I truly can't think of anything that I can even compare this to historically. It would be like being able to speak to the people who read Dracula when it was first published and making them watch The Lost Boys or Twilight or Interview with the Vampire. You have to leave what was previously established, and maybe a lot of people don't like that because it can feel like they have to do all this homework to catch up, to where things are right now. They remember Star Wars not necessarily from having consumed it before, but they just know, oh, there's Luke Skywalker and there's Han Solo and there's Princess Leia, and that status quo has not been changed for so long, and this can feel like a big shift. So a lot of people feel like you can't just jump back into Star Wars, which I think they're trying to correct with the way you describe season 2 of Visions to me and how much I enjoyed season 1. It was not reliant on coming in with all that knowledge. So you can do that, but it may present itself to consumers as something that is very difficult to just jump into. So I think that's
Yeah.
something that Disney has to be cognizant of, is that you can't bring back everybody that loved it before. But the obvious problem with Disney Plus is that if you don't have it in your country, or if you're not willing to pay like a monthly subscription fee in that model, you're losing out on all this content. You don't have any place else to go. Disney is very closely guarding its accessibility when it comes to things on the Disney Plus. These are people, of course, who invented the Disney Vault. So they know a thing or two about keeping things very close to their chest when it comes to the channels through which you can get it. So without
I
Disney,
don't know what strings Tony Gilroy pulls, but I think over the holidays, Andor was streaming on like actual TV, FX channel.
it may be that perception, as we talked about in our previous episode discussing Hulu and the advantages that it poses to the Disney Corporation. It's an easy place to divert, content that is more adult and away from the quote unquote Disney brand. I think, yeah, it's the other Disney problem is that they don't know when to pump the brakes. They will churn things out to the point where you can see like the light leaving Diego Luna's eyes, not because he doesn't love the character anymore, but because he's in the makeup chair at 3:30 in the morning and he hasn't seen his family in 6 months. And I guess the only difference between that and Guantanamo Bay is that he has to do a press tour afterwards promoting what he did on the show. He's just exhausted, he's tired. I think you and I, Kira, we talked about the insane schedule that we saw for Jenna Ortega in
Oh my
Wednesday.
goodness.
It's that kind of television production that you have to capitalize on a very specific moment in the market, and then you're churning things out to the detriment of the quality because everybody involved in it becomes exhausted, and there is nothing in this world that is better served by creatives or anybody working while they're exhausted and tired and unmotivated. And Disney seems to run into that problem so much because they're so afraid of losing any type of attention. They want to occupy a space within in the public consciousness at all times.
I think we're seeing Disney especially excels at this, but I think we're seeing some more of this sadly across all streaming channels because they want to be part of the zeitgeist now more and more. The Jenna Ortega schedule, which was alarming, is
Mm-hmm.
totally Netflix led. Like, let the girl sleep, let her eat, let her live her life.
Yeah,
You
let
know?
her have feeling in her fingers that don't dissipate because of constant cello lessons where she's supposed to be Yo-Yo Ma within 6 months. That's crazy. But the whole point of something like Star Wars is that it's timeless. I mean, it came from, a very uh, sort of ancient storytelling root sort of place. Like we talk about its origins within a lot of stories around, Western movies, which are in turn a copy of samurai movies. None of those are contemporary things. So what's the rush? It's Star Wars. You can only hurt its legacy if you are pumping stuff out constantly, because that's not the way Star Wars built its initial momentum. So I think that's another thing with streaming is, unlike theaters, it doesn't have that break. When you're making movies, you
Yeah.
realize, oh, it takes time to make a movie. You got to put things out, and you can put out episodes weekly, and that buys you some time. Okay, you've built content that lasts you 2 months, but with a movie, everyone is like, okay, it's out. We need another one in 2 more years, otherwise we'll lose public consciousness. And it's I don't think they're going to go back to theaters because of this. They think that they lose that real estate in a person's brain if they go into theaters and make movies. So
Some of that, again, like general cultural things are moving towards TV a lot more. And I think the theater reliance, I think that that might reset itself now, like coming out of the pandemic. But like the habits of people have changed so much that they're so, everyone is so tied to streaming revenue, and like the prestige is almost like now balanced. It used to be TV lower than theaters, and now it's like, now like the lines are blurred. TV or
that whole golden
theaters.
age of television that came in the late 2000s definitely shifted that perspective from a talent point of view. But
Yeah.
I think for theaters, again, it's like a different model, right? Because of the physical limitations of how you play movies.
Physical
If
limitations
you're
and the distance you
yeah,
get, actually the to the
yeah,
point you get to wait, you get to miss it.
yes, exactly. You have a specific time where people are supposed to watch the movie. If your movie is playing there, another movie can't play there. And those limitations are all removed from streaming, right? Like you have multiple accounts. You can watch the show anytime, anywhere. You can watch one episode of one show and then move on to another. It's not like, oh, I missed the 6 o'clock showing. I have to go for the 9 o'clock showing now. Like you can tell me if I'm wrong in this perception of mine, but also because the direction of Star Wars it's shifting towards the Filoni verse. A lot of people are like, I haven't seen all these TV shows. I haven't seen Clone Wars and Rebels and Resistance. It that could be a perception that Disney's like, let's not even mess with that. Let's just keep things going in streaming where we can be telling people to do their homework by watching it and, recommending more seasons of those other shows while when they finish one series or finish an episode or something. So that yeah, I just think
I will say, I
go
will say
ahead.
they've done a good job until now. So a lot of again, just anecdotal evidence, and my family and friends who have watched, let's say, Mandalorian, they get it. They get the story. They understand Ahsoka is an important character. They understand, for example, Dark Saber seems to be a hallowed object within this culture of Mandalorians and this planet. And they haven't watched, like, that's all they need to know. They haven't watched, like, because Star Wars Rebels goes into Dark Saber and Mandalorian culture a lot more. So you don't need to watch that. If you want to, if you really love the story, you could watch it, but you don't need to watch that to continue the story. So I think up until now they've been good, but I am getting how Book of Boba Fett really tied into Mandalorians, how Ahsoka is going to tie into Mandalorian. Of course, it's the Mandoverse. I think it's going to get harder and harder to be a standalone property. And yeah, I would be interested to see on how they execute on that. I'd love to
Yeah.
keep, as a product creator and a lover of products, I would love to keep them
Yeah.
as disconnected as possible, and hopefully they've learned. Like, that's what happened to MCU Phase 4, and
This is
hopefully
an
they've learned in the same family.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation that Disney has created for themselves. They're being hoisted by their own petard because they have created a cinematic landscape of where not anything comes in and makes money at the box office, right? You can't have a lot of weird stories coming in to make money at the box office, which is what Star Wars was. My prediction is that this content that they make for streaming and that the content that they if they ever make for theatrical release is going to be vastly different and actually almost disconnected. Well, obviously they'll
I
be in the
agree.
same universe, but the film stories I think will just be like an expansion of what Visions were, but in a live action context where it's going to start and end with the same characters who don't tie into anything else in their very specific part of the Star Wars universe. They interact with only the same people, so it can be completely different and divorced from everything else that's going on in the TV shows.
100%. That would be the correct move. And I think there's again, there's so many untapped stories and in this vast like universe. Why are we not touching all of these properties and all of these stories and actually like getting
Yeah.
inspired by them, like bring different voices, different characters behind
Dave
and in front of the
Filoni
camera?
and Jon Favreau have to come in and do that heavy lifting, because as things were before that time of the when things were being made for the sequel franchise, so many creative bridges were burned at Lucasfilm. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, some deserved, some not deserved. When Phil Lord and Chris Miller left, everyone was like, it would have been fun to see a 21 Jump Street kind of thing with Han Solo. And then they made Spider-Verse, and that was incredible. And they were like, what a missed opportunity. They would have done so well in the Star Wars universe. And then there's Colin Trevorrow, who got booted off of episode 9 because Kathleen Kennedy popped in the Book of Henry on her DVD and said, "What the fuck?" and called him and said,
Yeah.
"Yeah."
No, that was well deserved. That was well deserved. So
And it took, for them to come to the low prestige, quote unquote, arena of streaming before they had people of color and women behind the camera. So again, they were in a bad shape, and they're slowly starting to get that
this is
respect back from the rest of the
yeah.
industry. So and
Yeah.
I know there
Would
are a
you say
couple
the
of
force is would you say the force is awakening again?
I mean, it was disturbed for sure, and it got coarse and irritating and rough, and it got everywhere. But I think, yeah, things are coming back a little bit. The broken pieces are being put
Yes,
together. Some
reset.
fences are being mended, and I think there's like a list of theatrical releases,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
so there are projects. Speaking of movies, I think there are projects that we are yet to hear where they are in terms of like progress, but there is an untitled Kevin Feige project, y'all. He's very interested in making a Star Wars movie. As I
Sorry,
understand it, a
he's
very
directing. He's
no,
directing
I
a
think
movie.
just I don't think so. I think just
Okay,
like
I hope not.
producing. But Michael Waldron is attached with that. Writer of Loki is attached with this project as well, so that gives me hope. And there's also Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, just like the video game we mentioned. There's an untitled Taika Waititi project. Love you, Taika, but bring a different energy than
No,
Thor: Love and
I
Thunder,
go back to
man.
indie filmmaking on a $5 budget. Like, you're done,
Yeah. Yeah, you're done. We take away your creds, man. Okay, and then there's I don't know how I feel about this, but an untitled Damon Lindelof project. So we'll
I
see.
I apologize for this, viewers. This was not the case a few days ago. The pilot light of hope left Kira's eyes as soon as she discovered that he was in charge of Lost and working with J.J. Abrams before on Star Trek.
Yeah, my soul left my body. And
I'm sorry.
a titled Sean Levy project is also in the works, which yeah,
Oh, Stranger
that
Things
could be
guy
good.
now, right? He is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Stranger Things guy now. He was making family friendly comedies before, and then he did a hard pivot into prestige television. And I would say, Disney, if you're trying to avoid running things into ground, don't get the Stranger Things guy.
Wait, am I wrong in thinking that he also did Free Guy?
He did do Free
Because
Guy. He
yeah,
did
my soul
do
just left
that
my body again.
again, right? Yeah, but can you not tell the theme? They want broad audiences for the theatrical releases and the niche ones on
Yeah.
streaming.
Final thoughts. So we've talked about how Star Wars has built a remarkable streaming roadmap and continues to strategize and execute on it with great vigor and thought, all with our CPO, Chief Product Officer, Dave Filoni at the helm. So what's next? Streaming is such a fertile place to experiment, as we've mentioned before and throughout this episode, almost to a level that almost you can do it without fear, you know? So where could this story, the universe, go on streaming? There's so many source materials just out there begging to be adapted, or just like new stories that have not been written yet and not been told yet. I was thinking, do I want an Ezra Bridger and Grand Admiral Thrawn buddy comedy? Do I want a space creatures documentary featuring Purgles narrated by David Attenborough? Do I want a high school comedy with normal teens in the galaxy living during wartime, a la Derry Girls? Do I want a sports drama focused on the coach who sacrifices everything for pod racing? Friday Night Lights in space, baby, let's go. There's so many stories and so many genres and so many ways they can really explore this galaxy.
Yeah. I know this is gonna immediately resonate with you. I would love to see horror in Star Wars. I remember watching the commentary for Rogue One by Red Letter Media, and they said, "Oh, there's never been a horror movie done in Star Wars," and they jokingly proposed one called The Wampa. With two V's, like the witch, like a stark, moody horror film that's shot in like natural light on the ice planet of Hoth. That would be cool. I'm not even going to pretend that that doesn't sound cool on paper, but
why has that not been made yet? Like, that would be amazing. Just like a witch floating in space.
I mean, yeah, the story of the witch is told by another female Padawan in the Order. Maybe set a few hundred years back to whatever, like the colonial period of the, the Galactic Empire. Oh, well, it wasn't. It was not the Federation of Planets. Oops, that's the wrong franchise. In the colonial time period, like the ancient times and that, you can show things like a little bit old looking, and then, she gets accused of witchcraft in the Jedi Order or whatever.
Oh, Lord. Someone get on this ASAP. I want Black Phillip type character to be like, wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes. Goatmen in Star Wars. Why has this not been done? Bring Anya Taylor-Joy back. Bring her back.
Oh my, Anya in Star Wars? I would die. Oh my god, that would be amazing, because I've been thinking about how much mythology, unexplored mythology, was actually told at the end of Clone Wars animated series, at the all throughout Rebels, that we have never explored in the movies. Like we did politics, which whatever. Phantom Menace was its own thing, but there's so many ways that you can really pull into the supernatural and the horror aspect into this world, and that would be very exciting. The genre theme is very unexplored.
I would also love to see like Chinatown, but forget it, Jake. Stop. It's Mos Eisley. My God.
Yeah.
Like there's the seedy underbelly side that's kind of exposed when you see the things of like Han Solo's like that was what I really loved about that movie.
And they do have this, right, with the crime syndicates, the Pikes, the Hutts. With Boba Fett, they explored some of that. Him becoming the crime lord of Tatooine. And there is huge fan demand for Crimson Dawn with Dryden Voss. We saw that in Solo. Maul, Kira. Please, Emilia Clarke, come back into my life.
Ocean's 11 or Chinatown in Star Wars would be a lot of fun. It would be light. It would be humorous, like comedic. Yes, like a proper one. Like something with Steven Soderbergh. Bring him in. Who cares? He's really good at making heist movies. He's proved it. And imagine giving him like all of these comedic situations that can happen. Like imagine Han Solo having to go in and like steal uniforms that are clearly too small for him, or they were meant to be for another species of alien, so he's like fitting his body in weird and trying to be an Imperial guard, stealing stuff or putting on a fake mustache and saying, "Hello, I'm Blim Blarney, Imperial space cop." And I would have loved to have seen that. That would have been fun.
Yeah, in fact, they do this in Rebels. They're always finding stormtrooper outfits that just like completely fit them, just slide on, looking great, and always like getting outfits and helmets and going into places where they don't belong. This is very much in the spirit of Rebels. Yeah. You said Steven Soderbergh, and I was like, do we want Magic Mike in space? Like a fun story.
There's a burlesque show in San Francisco called The Empire Strips Back, right?
I think you told me about it.
Yeah, so Magic
and watch it.
Magic Mike in Star Wars sort of does exist, but yeah. Maybe the kids don't want to see the strippers. I get that, but yeah.
It's okay. Bring it to streaming and find your audience, and Favreau and Filoni, add it to the roadmap.
Make them like can dancers. That would be cute.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless, and we are excited in general about what the roadmap says of Star Wars on streaming, and I hope, because they're in the same family with Disney, that they've learned from MCU's mistakes and they can iterate on them and do them better and actually improve upon some of the things that MCU has learned. So that is, I think, where we'll end it. Raven, any thoughts, other thoughts from you? Or
if people have not watched the cinematic masterpiece Little Italy, please do, because it features our dearly beloved Anakin Skywalker, based in Little Italy. Spoiler, it's not Little Italy, New York. It's the world famous Little Italy of Vancouver. So
yeah.
But he's got a great Italian accent in it. I'm in agony, Padme.
I think, all right, next time we could possibly do an Oscars reaction. So Oscars are March 13th. We are, as you know, very invested in the Oscars and the Andrea Riseborough drama, and just dunking on why it's not on streaming yet. So you know our thoughts. But we might do a reaction, and other than that, we are mostly taking a couple-ish weeks off to prep for season 2, which is coming soon. So look out for that. But until then, bye, full screeners.
Bye, everybody. Stay warm and safe.